Good morning, everyone. This is Bob Hughes from Advantage Benefits Group, and we want to thank you for taking some time to spend with us this morning on this webinar. Pretty interesting, the turnout. We have over 200 people signed up for it, so it almost crashed the ABG servers like Taylor Swift did for Bria and Kurt. But we move on. This is obviously a topic that a lot of us have had questions on. There's been a lot in the news about weight loss drugs. These gene therapy treatments have been on the horizon, and they're finally here. And as we sat around at the table, tried to make sure we could answer the questions that we had about what is the reason to cover these, what would be the reasons to exclude these, what would be the implications of either, what do the costs look like, what do the outcomes look like, and in a perfect world, could payments be tied to actual outcomes? Because many of these drugs are between, and these treatments are between $1 million and $3 million. And when you think of a self-funded person, the stop loss is going to take the majority of that hit. How are they going to price for these? So again, what are the implications of covering them, not covering them? What is the likelihood of these happening, and what type of success rates? So we try to get a great group of people together that could answer these types of questions. If you are fully insured, you'll hear whether the plans are going to cover that, the carriers, and how much that is going to potentially increase the rates of fully insured. And then we're going to segue into the weight loss drugs. And certainly this has been in the news a lot. And I've learned a lot from preparing for this webinar. Our whole team has, in terms of the effectiveness of them, how long you have to take them, what happens when you stop taking them, and what do they cost. And I think if you haven't dug into this, you're going to learn a lot and find it helpful. So appreciate your time, and we appreciate the great guests we have this morning to share this information. We have questions. A lot of you submitted some great questions that we've baked into asking the presenters, but also if you want to submit questions during the meeting, we'll be monitoring those and taking those at the end. So without further ado, let's get right into it, and as we enjoy the last days of summer. So the guests that we have today, and I want to thank them very much, from Priority Health. We have Ellen Walkus, who's Provider Strategy and Solution Specialist for Pharmacy Operations. That sounds like a lot. Eric Witten, actually Director of Underwriting, which will be great on the stop loss and impact costs. And then from the Blue Cross team, we have Aaron Olmstead, Clinical Pharmacist, Health Outcomes and Provider Partnerships. Busy job there. Adam D., Vice President Actuary. He spoke at our annual in-person, and you might remember, last March. And then Jennifer Sumowitz, Clinical Director, Pharmacy and Medical Benefit Management. And then from a stop loss perspective from Tokyo Marine, we have Jason Thith. So very excited for our group today, and hopefully you'll find them informative. There will also be a recording of this sent to you if you registered for the event. And if you have any questions, you can't get in or something like that, don't hesitate to reach out to the ABG team. We'll make sure that we get that for you. So let's kick it off, and Ellen from Priority Health is going to give us an overview of gene therapy, what it is, what it includes, and why it's here now. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Ellen.
Thanks so much, appreciate that. And if we could go to the first slide, the next slide rather. The FDA expects to approve 10 to 20 gene therapies per year by 2025, and the prices can range from $850,000 to $5 million. I thought it would be helpful to, if we can go to the next slide, to kind of talk about the difference between gene and cell therapy, because often both terms are used interchangeably when referencing these products. They both modify the genetic blueprint to our bodies, but they do so in different ways. Gene therapy often uses vectors to transfer modified genes to the patient. Cell therapy uses living cells, either collected from the patient or the donor. They're modified in a lab and then infused to the patient. And CAR T utilizes elements of both. So why are these a big deal? They do offer a new approach for historically difficult to treat diseases with limited options. For cancer specifically, CAR T has offered an opportunity to keep very advanced cancer at bay for many years. I thought it would be helpful to kind of go through an overview of what CAR T therapy is. If you want to move to the next slide. So CAR T therapy, chimeric antigen receptor T cell therapy, It basically uses the T cells, which are naturally occurring in our bodies, to orchestrate our immune response, and that's the backbone of CAR T cells. So the first step is the collection of T cells. The second step is converting the T cells into CAR T cells, where they're grown into the lab. And then step 4, they're infused into the patient. Now, this is done at the center, and it requires patients to be around that center for 4 weeks. They can't be more than 2 hours away. And I will say that the side effects, the most frequent and serious side effect is cytokine release syndrome. Essentially, it's an overstimulation of the patient's immune system, and it's very dangerous, high fevers, drops in blood pressure. So that part of the challenge with CAR T treatment is that it could include hospital stays and other costs as well. If you want to move to the next slide. The gene therapy that's covered as of June 2023 for Priority Health, they're listed here. You can see that Kymriah, Tecartus, and Yescarta, they're all CAR T therapy. Many of these therapies treat cancer, and I think it's really important when you're looking at what you're covering to make sure that if you're looking at another option for gene therapy, that there isn't an exclusion for CAR T therapy or an inclusion for some of the cancer treatments. They seem to be the most popular treatments and what we get the most requests for. And if you want to move to the next slide. So the drug pipeline, and this is another reason it's a big deal, is the 2023 and 2024, there are 22 total agents, and 7 of them are being developed for cancers, followed by inherited immune system or retinal eye disorders. You can see 4 there, and also blood disorders. So we're seeing a lot of activity in those other areas as well. Because these gene and cell therapies are so expensive, they're really focusing on rare disease states and disease states where there aren't any other options for patients. Now, when we talk about the utilization management, I know there was a question, is gene therapy covered? And gene therapy at Priority Health is covered for fully funded, grandfathered transitional plans and optimized level funding groups. Self-funded groups can opt into gene therapy as well. Now, there is a limit per member on gene therapy treatments. I do want to state that for all of our gene therapy treatments, it is 1 time per treatment per lifetime. So one of the questions that was asked, what happens if it doesn't work? They would not be eligible for additional treatment. So first, the gene therapy is approved by the FDA. Priority Health does limit it to the FDA prescribing information. And then it's evaluated by our P&T committee, which is our Physician and Therapeutics Committee. And this is made up of physicians, specialists, and pharmacists. And they establish the safety, efficacy, and they look at what other alternatives are available before something is added to formulary to ensure that our members receive the most appropriate and cost-effective therapy. And I do want to note that if a drug is approved by the FDA, that doesn't guarantee placement on our formulary. And I think that this is really important as we look at what the FDA is doing with accelerated approvals, where maybe some of the drugs haven't necessarily met the endpoint yet. So I think that that's really important to point out. Once it's on our formulary, the facilities must be on our fee schedule, and then we do have prior authorization criteria as well. I thought it would be helpful if we go to the next slide to look at what our prior authorization criteria looks like. And all of the criteria for gene therapy and all of our drugs can be found on our pharmacy website. But Hemgenix is a treatment for hemophilia B. And before the drug is covered, the member must have a diagnosis of moderate or severe hemophilia. And we actually look at an objective criteria to look at moderate or severe. The patient must be male, at least 18 years of age, and prescribed in consultation with a hematologist. Again, all of the genes therapy is used only to the approved labeling. So we're not approving any experimental drugs at this time. So it has to be to the FDA label. And for Hemgenix, the safety and efficacy of repeat administration has not been evaluated. So again, it's one treatment per lifetime. Now, even though these drugs have wonderful promise and it's really exciting, part of the challenge is that it's hard to know what the durability of all of these gene therapies is going to be. And I know that one question came up is that if someone needed factor, even after getting this treatment, would they be able to get factor? And they would be able to, absolutely. So I think that, and the other thing that we're looking at too is follow-up and patient assessment for these drugs. So I'm not going to go through the utilization management for all of the drugs, but I just wanted to give you a sample that we're really trying to make sure that the most appropriate patients get these medications, especially given their cost. So I think that we can go to Jennifer to talk about Blue Cross Blue Shield and their utilization management.
That would be great. Yes, please. And then if you could also address, both of you, the drug manufacturers guaranteeing specific outcomes and time payments to that and where there's that would be awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
Sure. Can everybody hear me? Hopefully.
Yes.
I called in on my phone. Okay, great. So as far as our utilization management, somewhat similar to how Priority manages things. Just because a drug's approved by the FDA, we do not automatically add that product as a covered benefit. We do have some of the gene therapy products that are currently FDA approved through an accelerated process that we're still waiting for further results on their clinical trials. And so we are currently considering products like the new gene therapy for Duchenne's muscular dystrophy as experimental and investigational until we see those continued studies to make sure that the efficacy is truly there. These are very, very, very expensive medications, and we want to make sure that if a patient gets one, like Ellen said, these are one and done, because a lot of times you can't get the product again because you build up an antibody to the vector, and so there's no way to get it again. So we want to make sure that when people get these, they get them and they work. Okay, so that's the one thing. That's like they're not guaranteed to be covered. We do, however, if our P&T committee approves them, they are covered for fully insured and ASC groups unless a group chooses to not cover them. If they choose to not cover them, they have to choose kind of a bundled package to not cover any CAR T or gene therapy. So that is an option for an ASC group. We have a couple groups that do that, but typically with our really controlled utilization management criteria, we are very, very strict with who we allow these products to be used for, because we want to make sure that they're only being used for the patients who we deem, according to the trials and everything we see in the research, that these people are going to have the best success with them. So we develop our criteria well in advance of the products even coming to market, and then we continue to refine it and then take it to our P&T committee for final blessing. As far as outcomes-based contracts go, we do have outcomes-based contracts in place currently for the majority of the gene therapies that we cover. The interesting thing for Blue Cross, it's a little bit different than some other plans, is we actually have a provider-facing portal that we track real-time outcomes. So for our spinal muscular atrophy patients and for our CAR T patients and for our hemophilia patients, we actually, when they get these therapies, we actually send notifications to the provider that they have to enter patients' results and how they're doing. At first, we have them enter their baseline results, and then As they come in for their follow-up appointments, we send a notification that they have to go into this portal and enter follow-up outcomes. And we have seen really good response from our providers on this. These are only available at a very few sites, so it's a limited number of providers, so it's a little bit easier to manage this kind of process, but it really helps us in negotiating those contracts because this isn't data that we're taking and writing down. This is data that's coming directly from the provider, and it's real-time data. And so as soon as we start to see a patient decline, we're able to trigger that outcome and say, okay, manufacturer, this isn't working how you said it would. You need to pay us back a portion of what we paid. So currently, I will say, happily, we haven't seen a whole lot of our patients not do well, but like I said, we just started this last year, fall of 2022. So we continue to monitor, and we're really excited for the collaboration with our provider groups on this. Is there any other questions in regards to what Blue Cross is doing?
No, that's great. I think maybe we can just roll into risk management. And Adam, if you want to talk about what Blue Cross Blue Shield is doing, and paying particular attention to one of the comments that was made by Jennifer, and that is, the opportunity to opt out. What kind of impact that might have if somebody opts out and then something comes along down the road?
Sure. Yeah, I can start by talking about some of our risk management practices, as well as how we've accounted for various cell and gene therapies within our rating. So we, across lines of business that are probably most relevant to this audience, have accounted for the prospective cost of gene therapy in 2024 by including that within our rates. It's part of our trend development and claims projection in the small group space where everything is community rated. It is part of our trend projection utilized in the large group fully insured space. And we have also accounted for the anticipated costs of gene therapy in terms of our stop loss rates for self-funded customers. What we have done within our risk management practices is, as Jennifer noted, our approach to gene therapy is more of an opt-out than an opt-in in comparison to how Priority handles that for self-funded groups. As such, we really don't have a lot of underwriting criteria at this point. We're trying to avoid doing a lot of underwriting criteria in relation to these conditions, these patients, and these drugs. And I think, as Jennifer noted, to date, we only have a very, very small number of groups that have gone down the path of choosing to exclude. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty with the pipeline on these drugs these types of drugs going forward, and their associated cost and their number of patients that they are going to treat. So it is something that we continuously monitor, try to keep up with the latest and greatest developments, and from an actuarial and underwriting perspective, work very closely with people like Jennifer and her teams internally to make sure we're putting out estimates for the future that are most reflective of what we internally think is going to happen.
Great, thank you. Eric, what's Priority Health doing?
Thank you. Good morning. Yeah, so from Priority Health's perspective, we have, when you talk about gene therapy and cell therapy and our approach, we do, as Adam alluded to, we have adopted an opt-in, opt-out approach when it comes to our stop loss, right? For fully funded, fully insured business, we too have filed, rates and increases appropriate to help us, mitigate and offset some of that risk to our book of business through our trends and claims projections as well for small group and large group fully funded business. But again, on stop loss, we actually have adopted the opt-in or opt-out approach, whereas if customers who would like to opt in, we have basically established a $4.93 per employee per month rate helped us, help our actuaries helped us develop that as far as their projections on what the number of gene therapies that we anticipate seeing in the coming year, and some to help offset some of the costs associated with that. We're estimating that we're going to see costs upwards of $66 million in the coming year for gene and cell therapy coverage. And in our fully funded filing, we actually filed a fee of approximately $11 per employee per month, which will not necessarily cover the entire amount that we will see, but it will help us, like I said, in offsetting rates in the future and helping us deal with the trends in this industry. As far as stop loss, we actually, the $493 per employee per month is not expected to help cover all of the therapies that we expect to see, which our actuaries have said will range in the 7 to 10 members for the coming year. That's what's projected. So if you want to go to the slides, we can just speak to some of that. I just wanted to list here some of the facts that we are aware of in this industry when it comes to gene and cell therapy. According to the NIH, there are 7,000 rare diseases affecting between 25 and 30 million Americans. So to put that in perspective, that's 1 in every 3 or 4 cars you see on the road, or 1 person in every elevator. That is huge, and that is what's on the horizon. So Priority Health, we actually cover, as Ellen alluded to, 11 of the 27 total currently approved gene therapies, with over 2,000 in development worldwide as we speak. So that's numbers more than doubled from a year ago, which is huge. And this question, came up in some prior discussions as to what percentage of our book of business is actually covering, since we do have that, opt-in, opt-out approach. And that the answer to that is currently 30% of Priority Health's stop-loss book of business currently opts into gene and cell therapy coverage. And of course, with the enhanced focus in this area, we expect that number to grow, as plan sponsors look for ways to manage costs. And as of mid-2022, there are over, again, 2,000 gene therapies in development. So from early stage to late stage clinical testing, like I said, more than double what that number was the year prior. So the last point here I want to just refer to is how the federal government, we do understand they're researching several options to help carriers and plan sponsors and patients deal with the extremely high costs of gene and cell therapy treatments. So we're looking out, and forward to what develops in that area as well. Just have 2 more slides. We can go to the next slide. Just wanted to list here and put things in perspective even more, I should say, the cell and gene therapies in the pipeline. These 5 therapies we list here are actually very likely going to be approved by the time the end of the renewal cycle for the first quarter 2024 business that we're currently working on renewing. We expect these therapies to very likely be approved. So, and you can see here the range from 850,000 to, for these 5 therapies, up to 2.5 million, or that number could be even higher. So definitely something that is on our radar, on everyone's radar at this time. And one more slide. I think we have. Just wanted to touch on some of the risks of not covering gene and cell therapy. This comes up very often during discussions, as well as plan sponsors weighing their options and whether or not to cover gene therapy. And some of the risks that we thought it was important to highlight are the compliance issues. There could be various compliance issues that actually, come down when it comes to HIPAA and regulations and fully funded business versus self-funded business. There are, self-funded, you can actually opt in or opt out for a lot of carriers and decide whether you want to cover it. But there are just a lot of these considerations to keep in mind. Through public relations, risks and things like that may come down the pipe as far as your members and patients who are not receiving the care that they feel they deserve. It is definitely a risk to the plan sponsor, and an important decision that needs to be made on whether or not to cover gene or cell therapy, and also disability discrimination issues that could arise as a result of not covering. So all things to keep in mind when making those important decisions on whether or not to cover. That's it. Not sure.
Great. Thanks,
Who's
Erica.
next up? Thanks.
Appreciate
Oh,
it.
absolutely.
Next, we've got Jason Thiss from Tokyo Marine. And Jason's going to talk a little bit about what Tokyo Marine's doing and also look at what the rest of the market might be doing to react to this with external type products that we've seen in past history. Go ahead, Jason.
Hey, good morning. Appreciate you having me here, and this is a great webinar and great topic to be covering. So I'm just going to talk a little bit kind of about the current state of the market from a stop loss perspective. What's out there? What product options do you have? What are some other possible solutions? And then what does this look like going forward? So as far as current options, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with organ transplant, carve-out product from Self-Funded. We have a product that we sell. I know there are other competitors and competitive products in the marketplace where literally that risk is taken out. There are only a couple of those right now that I'm aware of, and I am not an expert on them because they are not mine. But I know Cigna has a product, I believe called Embark, and Stealth has a product. I believe the cost for each of those is something in the $1 ppm neighborhood, but obviously there's they have a specific list of therapies that are covered, and I know the list has started small, obviously because there's less therapies, and then as they're getting approved, they're adding them, and I do not know where each one of those products are at in the as far as adding additional therapies, but obviously as therapies get added, those costs are going to go up. I would assume that there are going to be other competitors with a similar product entering at some point. It's possible that we could have something of that nature at some point. The problem is, as you can imagine, that's a very, very difficult product to underwrite. You need to write a lot of profitable groups, at a low dollar PEPM to cover, one of these potential therapies when you're talking about, $2-3 million claims. So it's just it's something that's a challenge. So we do have, as far as other current solutions, the obvious one, obviously the plan can choose to not include this in the plan document or specifically carve it out. We would be, I think it was a gentleman from Blues that was speaking earlier. The way that we would interpret it is if you haven't specifically excluded it from your plan document, that it is included. Can't speak to how other carriers look at that, but that's been how we've handled that. We do have a solution that is not from a financial standpoint off the top, certainly not the be all end all, but we offer a step down deductible for groups that have our stop loss that agree to implement certain plan language that's come from our sister company, ETS, which is Emerging Therapy Solutions. They worked with the FIA group to craft this language. And so if they get, one of these groups gets a member or a patient that, is a gene therapy candidate, they engage ETS, they go through that process with them, and then they are able to take a 10% reduction in the step in their specific deductible up to a maximum of 50 grand. So obviously when you're talking about a $2 or $3 million claim, 50 grand is a drop in the bucket, but it still is a savings. And the biggest thing is we want to get the thing managed and get you engaged with ETS. So again, that it's something that's very important to get in front of and to obviously be all over as you're going through. So I would highly encourage anybody to check out Emerging Therapy Solutions. They have a website, you can Google it, I believe it's emergingtherapies.com, but they do a lot of webinars and they are specifically focused on gene therapy. So I think obviously everybody who's on this call is already doing this because you're educating yourselves as far as this particular topic. That's the best thing that you can do because as we, kind of move into bullet point 3 here, future solutions. I think a really important thing for everybody to keep in mind is that this stuff is changing so rapidly and so quickly that this space is going to look entirely different, certainly in 5 years, probably in a year, because constantly there are going to be new therapies, there are going to be new solutions. I do believe the market, will solve this, problem at some point. And I guess the example I use is, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with some of these specialty drug programs, carve-outs. First time I heard about one of these, I think was 2017, and there was one of them. Then the next year there was 2, and now I feel like there's 65. So I would anticipate that, the market will come with a solution for the larger issue. Obviously, it's one of those things, in our business that from a human level, this stuff is absolutely incredible and it's wonderful. But it is very expensive, and somebody does have to pay for it. So again, I applaud everybody who is attending today to, get yourselves educated and get the latest and greatest information on this topic.
Great, thanks, Jason. For all of you, one of the questions that we really haven't focused on or answered yet is, what kind of skin in the game do the manufacturers have that are making these drugs? And on top of that, the administration of these drugs is very expensive as well. So what are different organizations doing to try and put some risk back to the industry in terms of the outcomes? I'll leave that. Go ahead.
This is Jen Somowitz from Michigan. We do have, like I said, for the majority of the gene therapy products that we do cover, we do have outcomes-based contracts where there is skin in the game. I will tell you, in my mind, still not enough skin, but there's skin in the game. So if a product doesn't work, we do get a portion of what we paid for that product back. As far as administration goes, currently the gene therapies on the market right now really don't require hospitalization. CAR-T does, but the gene therapies that are currently on the market don't require extended hospitalization. Now that will change when the sickle cell gene therapy product comes out, because that will require leukodepletive chemotherapy before you get it. It'll look a lot like a stem cell transplant. So that will get really, really expensive. And that's when those discounts that in those collaborations with your centers of excellence that are doing these and that negotiation to maybe get a bundled rate or a discounted rate for these therapies is going to become even more important. So, but yeah, we currently do for, I would say, almost all, like maybe one gene therapy that's on the market we don't have. We don't currently have an outcomes-based contract, but all of the new hemophilia products, the spinal muscular atrophy products, all of those we do have outcomes-based contracts in place currently.
Thank you.
They're not 100% back, so I will tell you, I wish they were.
Yeah, I anticipated that. It would be nice if it was 100% back, but it's
it would.
Not Costco, is it? So one other question too, because it gives concern, is we talk about opting in and opting out and the impact of that. And one of the things Jason talked about was we have to have a lot of people buying a low dollar per employee per month policy in order to spread this risk across not just your blocks of business, but the entire country. So what are some of the things that you feel like might change as it relates to that as we move forward? Do you expect this to be more integrated and those costs to be more integrated, or do you expect the opt-in, opt-out to continue? And I'm gonna pass that one off to Eric, because you're the ones that have the fewest amount opted in at this particular time, based on what we understand.
Yeah, so I do believe that there will be some sort of migration to a more integrated approach as time goes on. I do think, like I said earlier, with the renewed and enhanced focus in this area at this time, that there will be an additional, there will be an uptick in the number of plan sponsors and patients who would like to have this covered and want to opt into this coverage. So yes, as time goes on, we will learn, more and more about how these costs are going to affect our book of business, as it will across the industry, and some of those costs may be able to be, offset and it into, across some of our stop loss premiums and fully insured premiums. But yeah, I do expect that to move closer towards a more integrated approach.
Got it. Thank you. Would it be fair to say that the cost right now is, roughly about 1% of premium? When we talk about $11 per employee per month, I'm kind of figuring it's about $1,100 per employee per month on average costs out there. Does that seem to make sense to you, Eric?
That is correct. It's more closer to 1.2% now going into 2024, but that is spot on.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just as a matter of time, I'm sure that people might still have questions. I think one of the things that, Jason said, I think everybody has said during this is really going to be an evolving area and an evolving topic, and I expect we'll be continuing to have discussions about gene therapy and how it's impacting plans and costs and what you do with plan design, not just over the next 12 months, but probably over the next few years. So with that, we're going to move on to Allison Olmstead, not Aaron, sorry about that, Allison, from Blue Cross Blue Shield. She's going to talk about weight loss medications and really kind of hit on the history of them. How are they gaining in popularity now? What do they cost, and what's the impact to the cost of your plan, and what types of outcomes are expected. So Allison, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, good morning. Thank you. My name is Allison Olmstead. I'm a clinical pharmacist here at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. And so for this portion of the webinar, I will really outline the Blue Cross and Blue Care Network standard benefit design offerings for our small group customers, in addition to discussing benefit design options for our large group customers in regards to weight loss drug coverage. I'll also spend some time describing the additional utilization management strategies that will really help address the growing trends in utilization and spend for these GLP drugs, and also describe our strategy to ensure that members employ a holistic approach to weight loss without relying on drug therapy alone. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
It's advancing in the office. We're waiting for
okay.
to catch up. Sorry.
No problem.
Allison, why don't you go ahead and go without the slides and then just speak?
Yeah, I think we're going to have to. I just got a notice that the connection to the GoToWebinar server went down. So hopefully people are still seeing us and hearing us, but it looks like we're going to be unable to share slides potentially.
Okay, so I'll just go and jump into describing our standard benefit design for our small group customers. And so this would be group customers with fewer than 50 FTE employees. Small group customers, there we go. Small group customers are required to use our custom select drug list. This fulfills requirements that are set forth by the Affordable Care Act, or ACA, for qualified health plans. So these requirements are also referred to as minimum essential coverage standards. Specifically, qualified health plans are required to cover drugs in predefined therapeutic categories, in addition to meeting minimum actuarial value thresholds that are defined by the ACA, all to ensure health plan affordability. I do want to note here, weight loss drugs, including the GLP-1 drugs, Saxenda and Wegovy, are not required ACA mandated essential benefits. Therefore, weight loss drugs are excluded on the custom select drug list. But I do want to note, conversely, GLP drugs that are FDA approved for type 2 diabetes are covered on the custom select drug list with prior authorization requirements. We can move on to the next slide. So this next slide here summarizes the benefit design options for weight loss drugs that are currently available to our large group customers. So all of our large group customers may select one of 4 formulary options, and these options are demonstrated here on this slide. So again, custom select formulary excludes coverage of weight loss drugs for both our small groups as well as our large customer groups. Our remaining formulary options, which are listed in the second box, include custom, clinical, and preferred drug lists. These drug lists or formularies do include weight loss medications that are covered as a base offering, including those GLP drugs, Saxenda and Wegovy. However, I do want to caveat this by saying that large employer groups that utilize these particular formularies may elect to exclude coverage of weight loss drugs by requesting a coverage change through their sales agent or their agent partner. And then again, GLPs that are FDA approved for type 2 diabetes are covered on all of our drug lists or formularies. We can move on. So I just want to provide very high level clinical basis or background to support Blue Cross and Blue Care Network's approach for covering GLP-1 drugs. I think that the statistic in the middle of the slide is very impactful, that approximately 70% of American adults are considered overweight or obese based on their BMI or body mass index. So the story here is that we really recognize that members who achieve or maintain a normal weight status are really more likely to avoid significant medical expenditures down the road. And this is achieved by reducing the risk for developing weight-related complications such as heart attack, stroke, and even developing type 2 diabetes. I do want to also call out that there have been recent clinical trial results which have demonstrated that using Wegovy for weight loss can significantly reduce the risk of adverse heart-related events by 20%. Therefore, in consideration of the clinical value conferred by these therapies, but also in recognition of the growing trends in utilization and spend for these products, our health plan does apply various utilization management strategies, such as prior authorization, to really ensure that these drugs are used in a cost-effective manner, but also in a way that is consistent with current clinical guidance. So these utilization management strategies will be described in the following section. But first, I do want to briefly touch on a couple of factors that have really driven the increase in demand and utilization for these drugs. So these factors include current medical guidelines that encourage the use of these therapies, as well as increased media attention that have touted the weight loss benefits associated with the GLP-1s. So specifically, current guidelines from the American Diabetes Association, or ADA, recommend the routine use of GLP-1 drugs that are FDA approved for diabetes. These are listed on the following slide. So again, this table specifically shows the GLPs that are FDA approved for type 2 diabetes. And just as a side note, you'll notice in the second column on this table that these drugs are, for the most part, covered on all of our drug lists, as long as that patient has a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes as a condition of prior authorization approval. I do want to quickly note that Ozempic is currently marketed under a different brand name, which is Wegovy for weight loss, and then Victoza is marketed under the brand name Saxenda for weight loss. So there is a little bit of a difference in regard to how these drugs are dosed for type 2 diabetes versus weight loss, but these drugs work by increasing the release of insulin after a person eats in order to bring down their blood sugar or blood glucose levels. So really that was the original basis for why these drugs were approved for type 2 diabetes, but it was also seen that these drugs can slow the movement of food from the stomach into the small intestine, thus making the patient feel full or satiated for a longer period of time. And this is how these drugs are able to confer weight loss benefit, which was really the basis for why Saxenda and Wegovy were later approved specifically for weight reduction. Next slide, please. So Saxenda and Wegovy are the only GLP-1 drugs that are currently FDA approved for chronic weight management in adults who are classified as obese or adults that are overweight with at least one weight-related condition. And then these drugs are also approved for the adolescent age group as long as they are considered obese based on their body mass index. And so for our large group customers that do cover the weight loss drugs, we do apply prior authorization or PA requirements, again, to ensure appropriate and cost-effective utilization. And so the current PA requirements are summarized on this slide, and we do require that the member be the appropriate FDA-approved age, that they meet the FDA-approved indication, which is described above. We also require, as a condition of first time or initial prior authorization approval, that the member is actively participating in appropriate lifestyle modification. So this is a big one here. We really want that member to be engaging in appropriate diet, exercise, or even engaging in a weight loss program such as Noom or Weight Watchers. And then for our fourth criteria, we require that the member is not using the weight loss drug in combination with other weight loss drug therapy. We also implement criteria for prior authorization renewal once that initial prior authorization expires. And we require that the member achieve a certain degree of weight loss or meet certain weight loss thresholds as a condition of PA renewal. But I also want to call out the note in the blue circle here. Blue Cross and Blue Care Network will be implementing additional PA requirements on September 1st and October 1st of this year to include additional lifestyle modification requirements. So our goal is really to ensure that members are maximizing the use of lifestyle modification, and that we really only want them to utilize weight loss drug therapy as a last resort. So we view that weight loss drugs should really only be used for a short duration of time, and that members should really use lifestyle modification alone to maintain a healthy weight once they are able to achieve those weight loss goals. In other words, we really hope that members will not use these drugs in perpetuity, but will instead employ a holistic lifestyle modification strategies over their lifetime to promote that healthy living. Next slide, please. So again, as I had mentioned, we do have new prior authorization criteria changes that will be effective on September 1st and October 1st of this year. These new criteria changes are summarized in the rightmost column of this table. So starting in September, that initial prior authorization period will be shortened from 12 months down to 4 months. This is really to ensure that providers are closely following up with our members to make sure that they are employing those appropriate lifestyle modifications. Effective on September 1st, we will also require that members are continuing to engage in those appropriate lifestyle modifications as a condition of prior authorization renewal. So that will then be required in addition to lifestyle modification as a condition for initial prior authorization approval. Then beginning in October 1st, we're really making our lifestyle modification criteria more strict by requiring that members trial lifestyle modification for at least 6 months before they are approved for weight loss drug therapy. We will also require that the member has not experienced a previous treatment failure, or in other words, were not able to achieve the desired or expected degree of weight loss on a GLP-1 drug for weight loss in the past. And so all of the criteria that are outlined on this table will be applied in addition to all of our previously existing prior authorization criteria that was summarized on the previous slide. So again, our hope is that these changes will really promote member engagement in lifestyle modification. Next slide. So this is just the final slide in my deck. Again, I just wanted to provide examples of what we are referring to when we say appropriate lifestyle modification or intervention. And so again, this can include participation in a formal lifestyle program. I think I provided examples, Noom or Weight Watchers, but then also this could also include just participation in appropriate diet and exercise under the supervision of their provider. So we are a bit flexible when it comes to how the members can engage in lifestyle modification. And then finally, for that second bullet point, we just want to make sure that providers are also closely monitoring our members who are started on these weight loss drug therapies. So with that, that wraps up my section on how Blue Cross is approaching benefit design and utilization management for these GLP drugs. I'll pass it over to the moderator for our Q&A session. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Allison. A couple quick, just one follow-up for you. What is Blue Cross doing to communicate with members that are currently using those drugs? I'm sure Priority has, similar types of approaches, but what are you doing as those things change, to communicate with existing people that are on existing therapies?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for any criteria change that is becoming more strict or more stringent, there is legislation, Public Act 60, which does require health plans to provide members with at least a 60-day advance notification. And so at Blue Cross, we try to be very transparent with our current coverage criteria requirements. And so we post all of our current prior authorization criteria on a publicly available document. It's called our Prior Authorization and Step Therapy Guideline. And then we also publish any upcoming changes that we're making to our prior authorization criteria on this document as well, at least 60 days in advance of implementation. We also communicate our PA changes directly to our provider partners so that they are also made aware of any upcoming PA changes that may impact their patients.
Got it. Thank you. Ellen, it sounds like Priority Health's taking a little bit different approach. Can you describe for us quickly what you're doing? You're on mute. And we're not hearing you, sorry. I'll pass that question over to Eric a little bit, because I do want to ask, from a cost perspective, what's happening within what you're doing for rating. What are these drugs costs, generally speaking, and what's Priority Health doing along those lines? And then I'll come back to Adam on that as well.
I think Ellen is still speaking. I don't want to step on toes, but I definitely.
No, go ahead. We just can't hear her,
okay.
Unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah, so we're still looking at a lot of options when it comes to the pricing and how we're going to handle the riders, and doing actually a lot of research on where we're going to land when it comes to, on our fully funded book of business, especially where we're going to have that price point. And so we need to basically stay tuned, as that is something we are still researching. And hopefully we can get Ellen to Ellen's audio so she can chime in.
Yeah, we still can't hear her, unfortunately.
Sorry.
That's Adam. What about Blue Cross? What are the impacts there? What are you looking at for the future as it relates to the cost of these drugs that impact the plans?
Sure. Yeah, I can speak to that. So as Allison covered, we have different approaches across our different size customers. So in the large group space, where it is largely included in the coverage, we have accounted for that in prospective trend. But one thing you have to remember, the industry and every insurance carrier has seen a sharp rise in utilization of these drugs in late 2022 and early 2023. As Allison showed, there are existing and upcoming prior authorization criteria that we have put in place that is likely going to get the utilization level to a more appropriate space going forward. So we have tried to account for that within our forward-looking pharmacy trends. And in terms of the benefit riders that are available to customers for exclusion, as you can imagine, the impact of electing those does vary based on exactly what you're looking to exclude, as well as the other cost sharing features of the benefit design that the customer has. But what I would give you is that those solutions will range in impact from anywhere from as low as 0.6% of the RX benefit to as high as almost 3% of the RX benefit. And if you think about that in terms of a combined medical and RX, if there is a 25% approximate spend for RX in comparison to medical, you can think of those riders as having somewhere between a 0.2 and a 0.8% impact on your total rate. Again, very dependent on exactly what you're doing and what your current benefit designs are, but that's a rough range of what you would expect to see in terms of a premium change.
I think Ellen became unmuted there for a second. So I think she's working.
Okay.
So I'm going to toss it back over to you, Ellen, because I think there was something else we talked about in terms of how these drugs impact people's physiologically. That's
Right.
a little concerning.
Yep, absolutely. And the other thing too is that one of the things that I work on a lot is, and we can go to the next slide, is price transparency, because these drugs have a list price of about $1,600 a month, and the long-term clinical outcomes are not known. What's really challenging is that the weight comes back after stopping the medication. So with Wegovy and Saxenda, you can expect about 5 to 15% weight loss. But again, that's an average. So some lose more, some don't lose, and some actually gain weight. So that definitely is a concern. Now, these are medications, as Allison suggested, for type 2 diabetes, but they're given at a higher dose for weight loss. And one of the challenges is that if people lose the weight very quickly, they can lose muscle mass. So actually their base metabolic rate actually goes down, right? So once they go off the medication, not only can they gain the weight back, but they've gained even more weight. So that definitely is a concern. So we really need to push back against the media. These medications are not a magic bullet. They're weekly injections, and they do require refrigeration and a sharps disposal. So that's a container, FDA-approved container for needles to reduce the risk of injury. If we can go to the next slide. So our concerns about the weight loss drug coverage, again, the high list price and the high prevalence of obesity in the population. If you think about 35% of adults in Michigan are obese, that definitely is a concern. And again, the other concern is the long-term sustainability. And then adherence. I did want to point out that Prime Therapeutics pharmacy benefit manager looked at about 4,200 patients for claims data. And what they found is that only 32% of patients stayed on these medications. So adherence is not great with them. So that definitely is a challenge, in part because of the side effect profile. And we've definitely heard about like the drug shortages as well. So I do want to say that at Priority Health, I'm really proud of our well-being hub, because it gives personalized support for members, not only with nutrition and exercise, but also helping with sleep and stress reduction. So I think that that's really important. And we also have diabetes prevention through Omada and Livongo, which are proven programs to really help manage members as well. If you could move to the next slide, I'll talk about coverage. So for self-funded, there will be an enhanced weight loss rider, including Wegovy, Saxenda, and Mounjaro, if it's approved, for 124. So that's the enhanced weight loss rider. For fully funded, we're still evaluating a more comprehensive solution and vendors to include these medications as adjunctive therapy to lifestyle and management. And what we're looking for there would definitely be a holistic approach, but also performance guarantees, and just to make sure that we set up our members for long-term health and long-term success. The one thing I'll mention too is that Mounjaro is approved for type 2 diabetes. If it does get the weight loss approval, the weight loss does look a little bit better with Mounjaro. So that could be something that we're considering going forward. Thanks.
Great, thank you. We're right at 10 o'clock, and as I said at the beginning, it might go a little long when I threw that out there. If anybody has any questions and wants to put those in the chat, we'd be happy to ask them. The questions we have been asking throughout are a combination of questions we got from people during registration and some questions that we had at ABG. I anticipate that we'll be asking a lot more questions as time moves along, and as people start to think about how they want to cover these medications. One last thing before we break away. Jason mentioned emerging therapy solutions, and I accidentally sent a note that I made for myself to the audience earlier to re-engage that. But emergingtherapies.com, and there's more information there about the gene therapy solutions and what's coming and other emerging therapies and how they might impacts plans in the future. So with that, I'll thank all of our attendees for participating in our webinar today. We really appreciate the information that you shared, and we look forward to getting more information and providing more information to our clients and prospective clients in the future. Thank you for attending today.